Welcome back to Energetically You. I'm your host, Megan Swan. I'm thrilled today to finally connect with Caytlyn D. She is the founder and creatrix of Integrative Pelvic Care, deeply committed to revolutionizing the story we have been told about living in a female body. Ooh, it's going to be so good. How we feel about and in our bodies affects every single aspect of our lives. I agree. It is her life's mission to support other women on their journey to feeling deep belonging in their own bodies on this earth. Beautiful. Integrative Pelvic Care offers a nervous system-centered approach to whole woman healing and lifelong vitality. Her work reaches women all over the globe to guide them back into the inherent wisdom and power they hold within their bodies. Caytlyn holds a sacred, tender container for women ready to explore this life-changing work. This is a pilgrimage deep into your own body. A descent into the shadows, ancestry, trauma, and emotions we hold within. It is a journey to reweaving every aspect of self back into relation with our sacred center. This is an invitation to explore our beliefs and stories about being a woman. She offers online programs and in-person retreats for women all over the world to connect and heal together. In-person retreats, energy and body work are hosted in Denver, Colorado, and Dublin, Ireland. We'll dive in to ask how she weaves herself between those two very cool places. And we'll get right to it. So let's dive in. Hi, Caytlyn. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm so happy we've managed to connect, and I'm so excited to share your wisdom with my audience. So first of all, how are you? How's your day been?
I am so good. Thank you. It's been a fluid Monday.
Awesome. Well, can you tell us a little bit about your story? I feel like women that are really passionate about pelvic floor health probably have a personal experience where it was a life-changing moment or several that they just thought, like, why do more women not know about the potential here? And I'd love to hear your story.
Thank you so much. Yes, it has been quite the ride and very much a personal journey for me that brought me into this work. And, finding the work is quite a different thing compared to deciding to leave a executive assistant role and jump into offering the work. Mm-hmm. So as far as finding pelvic care and the approach that I took, it was a personal healing journey. And I had done a lot of body work, was kind of always my thing when it came to healing. I never really did talk therapy. Wasn't into allopathic medicine, massage, Rolfing, other body works was always what I turned to. And eventually I got to a point where I felt really good. I had been doing a lot of work around trauma and childhood trauma, especially after losing my youngest sister to suicide, and really started putting together, wow, this is actually really affects and impacts our lives deeply when we go through these things as young children. And, for me specifically as a young woman, and how does that land in our body after tracking our safety and, so many layers there, both in the home, and then how does society also play a role? And so I found myself in a pelvic care practitioner's office. I had no idea that this was even a thing. Someone had described to me, receiving internal work, and I started kind of Googling out of curiosity because I had always dealt with numbness during sex. I still had really painful menstrual cycles. And I was kind of at the point where I was like, I'm going to figure this out or I will get a hysterectomy. Like, I don't want kids that bad. I'm over the pain. something needs to change. And so it wasn't too long into returning to my root and receiving this work in a very holistically, it's a holistic approach versus like a PT's office. And, you know, it really started to unlock so much understanding in my own body, so much, you know, fluidity returned, really. I felt, you know, having that understanding made me feel worthy of the things that I needed to take care of myself. Eventually, I was able to start talking more and more about my story and about the work, and kind of had this flare of like, where was this for all of us growing up? And that has definitely motivated me in bringing the work to other women, is just because I had, you know, in so many years of healing work, had no idea that this even existed. And that has definitely led me down this journey into bringing it online and offering the work in person now. And so it's been a very humbling and inspiring journey thus far.
Wow. Well, thank you for sharing that. I'm curious, was it sort of all at once where there was this shift in, you know, you had a physical experience with how things could be different, coupled with the knowledge that this existed, and I'm sure you pretty immediately started investigating even more, or was, you know, one sort of before the other?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, for quite some time, even after I started to receive the work, I was researching out of curiosity for my own body. I had no intention to share it with anyone. I was just fascinated by, you know, again, the fact that this even existed and the changes that I was feeling, and, you know, starting to do practices like pelvic steaming or yoni steaming at home. And, you know, through that, it wasn't even this shift of like, oh, my voice has returned and now I'm speaking up for myself. It was, I just had this pull to, for example, join in a small coaching program that occurred after COVID hit and my yoga studio closed down. So they took it online into a coaching program. And it was really one of the first times and places that I felt really comfortable speaking, and just having a place to practice that and having a container to continue the exploration and be able to have a conversation around it really started to unlock more and more within me. You know, and now I feel like it's so ancient and familiar to me as far as doing this work, and especially the in-person piece with women, that it really just was a complete awakening and unlocking a lot within my cells.
Incredible. Well, can you dive in a little bit deeper in terms of, you know, for me personally, I learned post babies and after my second child that this was a thing. And I knew that, well, I had read, I don't know if it's a fact, but that in certain European countries, like a pelvic floor health specialist is just sort of like an automatic thing you're going to see in your pregnancy and post-pregnancy journey. And it was complete news to me. And you know, I had one session that really changed multiple things for me. And I'm curious, can you tell us a little bit more about the application, or, you know, why other women who are, you know, not pregnant or post-pregnancy, you know, what sorts of things can this really be healing or informative to?
Yeah, absolutely. There are so many layers to it, and it really can be this thread of ancestral work and shadow work and whole body vitality and healing. And my body of work is called Integrative Pelvic Care, and that is really about integrating every part of ourselves back into relationship with our center, with our pelvis. Because when we go through life and we hold stress, if we have any early childhood trauma or an accident, or, you know, be bullied at school, anytime we start to track our safety, or watch what's going on around us, including, how we should look, how we should act, we start to hold this tension in our core and in our pelvic diaphragm, or the pelvic floor, as it's commonly called. And as this happens over time, we add in sucking in our bellies, we add in curving down our shoulders and protecting our hearts and protecting our major organs. We have this kind of curled in and over as a mechanism of protection, which is so wise of the body. But over time, as we hold tension, less blood flows. Less blood flow equals less lymph flow. Less lymph flow dehydrates tissues over time. And that is what impacts the nervous system on a physical level. So we have dry, depleted tissues pressing on nerves, which can impact either pleasure or lack thereof, or we can have pain, we can have numbness, we can have organ dysfunction, we can have this whole host of quote unquote women's health issues that seem disconnected, that we can go play this game of whack-a-mole in trying to treat them all and never really get to the bottom of anything, because we continue to go right to the place of where the imbalance is. We try to treat more of the symptom, and that comes from a whole conditioning around how we do that, and especially with the Western medical influence. And, when we come down to start with the root, which is our pelvis and our pelvic bowl, and begin to just create space surrounding the pelvis. In my introductory program that I require before any deeper work, we don't do any hands-on pelvic work. We start with the belly. We start with pelvic alignment. We start with just bringing awareness to this space. And that in and of itself can initiate huge changes and shifts in not only our energy and emotions, but also our physiology. Our bodies are so wise. They know what we think of them. They know what complexities and stories and trauma that we might hold in these tissues. So as we start to unwind tension, as we start to create space, I always like to acknowledge it's creating space in our life, and then in our home, and then in our body, blood starts to flow. And when blood flows, healing occurs. And so as we start to restore spaciousness and flow in our center, that impacts our whole body, because there are major blood vessels that are contained in our center. There are major lymph vessels and nerves. And when we, if we have a 3-lane highway and 2 lanes are closed down, there's congestion. And the same happens in our body when our center is closed off. So it's really, so exciting to witness, and for me to be able to see the women experience this in their own bodies, because the things that unwind and what surfaces and the physical benefits are often surprising. And, more blood flowing to the space means more sensation. It can improve our digestion. It can improve hormone function, cognitive function, mood, heart rate, and hormones. All of these different things can start to unwind and restore. And, a big piece of this is the nervous system and how many nerves innervate the pelvis, including the vagus nerve. So if we have physical trauma held in those tissues and we start to release that through just bringing awareness to the space, major shifts can occur.
Yeah, well, it's just like a massive boost in energy and immunity too, right? It's getting these things, exactly, quote unquote, flowing. Can you, you write beautifully on like a rethinking of both pain and pleasure, and then how they're a dichotomy. Can we talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. I shared a post just the other day. Pleasure is a symptom too. And I think that we often get so focused on our symptoms, which Of course we do. If we've been in pain for a long time, it is hard to move past and to zoom out and to not be kind of angry with our body and frustrated that nothing is changing. But we forget through conditioning around that really fuels the fear in our bodies and the fear of symptoms. And, oh, what's wrong with me? I'm broken. I need somebody else to fix me. I need to make sure I don't have cancer. Like all of these fear-based reasons to be in touch with our body. If we zoom out and start to look at the whole system, we can't work with just one piece of the body. No matter how hard we try, we're always impacting multiple systems, multiple tissues. And, when we are able to there's a couple of things here. When we can sit with sensation, like a pain, like discomfort, and really pause with it and listen, we can often feel that there's more going on under the surface than it just hurts. At the same time, if we're experiencing numbness or pain and we are seeking out, especially when it comes to the pelvis and the vagina, looking at getting to pleasure, that can be really uncomfortable. Anything that is not familiar feels unsafe, and that can come up consciously, and it can also surface kind of subconsciously, where there's like this resistance to the work, to the practices, to even looking at any of this, which I totally validate is normal and something that I continue to go through when I decide I'm going to up level to another container or more learning in my own body. It is, again, that feeling of could this be too good? Could this feel too good? And at the same time, the more, the other thing with pain is we often numb it. We often want to, and I was an ibuprofen popper for most of my life. I had sciatica, I had bulging discs, I had menstrual pain, and was eating 1,600 milligrams a day for a while, so much ibuprofen. And when we do that, we are indicating to our body and our nervous system that we're not listening. We're not paying attention to it. We're shutting it down. And that creates a response in more pain and more sensation, because our body is like, hello, please pay attention. We're trying to send you these signals. The body whispers before it screams. So when we start to, again, zoom out and really be present with our whole body. And this is, again, when I start work with women, we often don't start with, oh, you have pelvic pain, let's go internal and start to, try to fix something, because the body is likely going to brace against us and not be able to receive the work. And when we allow ourselves to kind of release the pressure that we are putting on ourselves and our body around pain and sensation, that often shifts things with more ease, a gentle approach, so much simplicity. We often are doing way too much to try to heal our bodies out of the best intentions and trying to do all the things. And I was doing this too. I was doing acupuncture, massage, pelvic care, going to yoga, all these different appointments. And it was just managing symptoms in a really holistic way. Yeah. But it was still, when COVID hit, it made me be like, oh, I was just trying to run around to continue to go to work and do my thing. So that has really inspired the work I share now online, is how much we can do for ourselves and our own body, slowing down, doing less, being gentle, is how we can create the conditions for healing to occur.
Yes. This is so much of my work in the last year, is really helping women give themselves permission to do less around, they come to me with their long list of wellness tools. It's like, I do this and I do this. It's like, okay, but when do you sit and do nothing? And when do you sleep? All the sort of more, we just, we kind of fall into the hustle, but from a healing, holistic wellness perspective, right?
Totally. And that goes back to the familiarity of the hustle. And it is exciting. I think there's a layer of excitement when we get down this path. And that's something I really resonate with. It's like, I want to do all the things. I want to learn all the things, and then there's also this, well, I'm doing all the things. So we're like, go, 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 go. And that's familiar as we're doing some usually uncomfortable healing work. So it's like fueling that fire within us, where the really hard work is slowing down and it is doing less. And it is, like you said, we are so used to having that list of like being, and I think it comes from like this, be the good girl, take care of everybody else, take care of yourself, do all these things. And it takes away from us actually being present. The work is being present with ourself and our body. And that is so uncomfortable.
Yeah. And I think also this kind of work is all about it's not always unwinding. Like sometimes it is adding on layers, but it's such a slow process. And when someone approaches it coming from that hustle energy and they don't see immediately, first they feel uncomfortable because it's requiring them to get uncomfortable. And then they don't see results, in 3 weeks. It's complex for people. A lot of people just, don't stick with it and think, I don't know how many times it's like, oh, meditation's not for me, or, XYZ wellness trend isn't for me because I'm not seeing my immediate, all the results that I've read, but those results come with complex unraveling practice, like doing everything with embodiment. It's not like a one and done scenario. It's doesn't necessarily need to be daily, but it's consistent work in that area. So the other thing I wanted to ask you was about, or you touched on it, that sometimes it's really difficult to understand this aspect of humanity, that we would really rather sit in a painful, familiar situation than try something new. Like how fearful it is to go out of our comfort zone, like the unknown, or looking silly, or even just feeling like we don't know what is going on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, I think that my it is an extreme example around this, is my staying in an abusive relationship for a couple of years. And, looking back now, it's like, well, how could I do that? And at the same time, it did feel safe. It felt scary to try to leave. It felt unsafe to try to run away, because what was he going to do to me if I tried that? Mm-hmm. And the same thing occurs even when we are going into something that is expansive, that is healing, that has, really beautiful intentions around it. Even, and I see it in every woman who steps into this work with me goes through those layers of it. And I see it in myself when I sign up for a program or do something new, or go see a new practitioner, or do a body work training. Like all of that is leaning into an edge. And what I have found to be so, so important is that we find containers and find spaces that we can completely unravel, that we can completely blow up our lives if we needed to. And whoever is holding that space can hold it and will not judge, and will not shame, and will not be mean, or say that we should do it faster or do it better or do it more like them. It's really, in this work, I see it especially, and my intention with it is that it's your journey. You're the only one living in your body. You're the only one who's lived through your life story, that's carrying the stories of your ancestors, that's experiencing life as you. So whatever you have, whatever comes up around this work, it might seem totally left field, like not related to pelvic care at all. And there's a story held in your body and tissues that is ready to unwind. And I think that in my healing journey has been so beautiful and inspiring and profound to really be able to question my beliefs about myself and life and body and everything, and be held no matter what, and it's such gentle work that we can never start over. Like, even my introductory program is the work I still go back to. Mm-hmm. We don't need more complex practices to support ourselves when the stories do get bigger, when we are doing ancestral work, or we're integrating plant medicine experiences, or, going through a midlife crisis. We need simplicity that is familiar. And the way that I teach this work is really building the foundation and cultivating resources within and around ourselves, and then adding small practices and small exercises that we can do, that we continue to return to the foundation, that we can continue to have that resource as we lean into a new edge. And that, it's really this titration practice of the familiar and a little bit more, or a little bit deeper, instead of, again, just going right in like, oh, you have pelvic pain, come see me in person and let me put my hands inside of you. Well, your body is probably going to freak out. You're probably going to be freaking out. Your body and your tissues are going to lock up. And, I use the example of, if we burn our hand, we aren't going to like press into the burn and wiggle our finger around and say, that's going to make it heal faster. The same is true with our pelvis, that if we have pain or dysfunction, there is a reason, and creating space around that first, and cultivating this relationship with our body and our nervous system, really honoring this descent into ourself, allows blood flow to start returning to these deeper and deeper tissues, and allows us to have blood flow knocking on the door of things like cervix or vagina when we do go to internal work. And, to be in a receptive, open, present state while receiving that, internal pelvic work is just magical and so profound.
Yeah, I love that. Well, I mean, I know that you talk about, it's like creating a sense of belonging in our own bodies. And so I think most of us don't realize how unsafe we feel in certain scenarios, or, it can be really subconscious. I love everything you just said. And also about the foundation, because, healing is not linear. We also want this trajectory that's always improving and never getting, going back to any other layer, or I don't know. Do you ever talk about how pain also is healing, or rather healing can be painful?
Yeah.
I remember having a broken arm as a kid, and like, I was never given any painkillers, and the whole time it was healing in the cast. Mm-hmm. It hurt.
Yeah, definitely. And I speak to, not only as I speak to a worse before better syndrome that I like to talk about, and not want to use the term warn here, but it's just, I think it needs to be normalized, because we go into this work with like such high hopes, such beautiful intentions. And sometimes, especially when we are carrying like old stagnant tissue in our uterus, or, in our intestines, or in our bodies, when we start to create space and allow blood flow and lymph to start to remove some of this waste from ourselves, there can be more bowel movements. There can be a heavier menstruation. There can be different things purging from our body that looks like, oh my gosh, I thought I was doing this work to heal, and this sucks. Or gross. All of these different things can come up.
This is not what I want.
And I see it as like there's dust on our insides, and we're kind of like blowing off the dust as we do these practices. Blood is flowing. Everything settles into our root. So as we start to bring this movement back into our pelvis, things are going to start flushing out of the body. And that is what we want. Better out than in.
Yeah.
And, the other piece of that is sickness or pain or some sort of discomfort, and moving. I see it as moving through that. We often, something hurts, we want to stop it, we want the painkiller, we want the surgery, whatever is going to fix it on the surface. And when we sit with that discomfort and really listen, like we're like, okay, we're in it body, we're going to listen, we're going to sit here with it, we move through it so much faster. And it can suck in the moment. I still go through this. I had a painful period about 3 cycles ago, and the first day was miserable, and I hadn't had that in so long. And I was like, I wanted to reach for the ibuprofen, and I moved through. I knew that I was moving through some like pretty old ancestral related stuff. And after day 1, it was like a beautiful menstruation, and there was no pain, and my whole body, there was almost a sense of pleasure and spaciousness and expansion on the other side of that. It can be this kind of portal of sickness or, pain or discomfort. And again, that is something where we are so conditioned around something is wrong. This is bad. I'm doing it wrong. I need to fix this. What's wrong? All of these different things. And that's why it's so important to slow down, to understand. I teach a lot around anatomy, because I think that being told we should do something just because this is going to help us, it doesn't remind us of our power and why these things work and what could actually be going on under the surface. So returning to that basic, having a manual for our body is like unheard of. We live in these things for our whole life. So being able to understand that, and then, learn to listen and learn to pause and learn to slow down. And it is a process. I say it's like turning a dial, not flipping a switch, because, as women, we have this month-long cycle. And when we do a practice or we start and initiate a new anything, we go through one cycle, and we've hit our cycle one time at every point. Now we have to go through it again to do 2. And this is not what the diet and exercise industry, especially, or the medical industry, which fuels both of those industries, teaches us. We're supposed to have it fast, have it now, and, or we think we're failing and we give up. And I think the other piece of that is we do too much right off the bat. It doesn't work. So we're like, good, I'm not doing this. Whereas when we do slow things, I think 5 minutes of intentional practice every day is better than an hour long once a week, where we're like, when is this going to be over?
Yeah. So much that you said there. So one thing is changing the story around pain, because I think it's not commonly understood that, painkillers actually inhibit healing. 1, and 2, that pain can be extremely informative, whether it's physically in terms of your limitations at the stage of healing, or spiritually, emotionally, all the things that are coming up. And if you're just numbing it, it's preventing you from really, I love the word portal. I love that word. Maximizing the potential of that experience and moving on. Mm-hmm. The other thing I wanted to ask your opinion, and I will be respectful of your time. So second last question, changing the narrative just around bleeding and blood. I mean, this is another one that I feel it is changing, but it's often when I'm outside of sort of more more spiritual or coaching circles, I realized no, it's still like not commonly thought of as a desirable time of the month, or I don't know. There's like all these stories that I was taught very inadvertently as a child around menstruation, and I, not so much from anyone directly, I got it from 17 magazine, and it just comes from, and I'm more attuned to it now as a mother, like all these very subtle messages that come from everywhere. Mm-hmm. And I was really inspired, or not inspired, but optimistic. I don't know if you've seen the Disney Pixar about turning red, and no,
oh
my God, you have to see that movie.
It's amazing.
So the whole, like the red panda that the little girl has to deal with, that then she learns that, all of her mother and her aunts and her grandmother, it's this lovable creature, but that you have to hide it and control it. Right. And so it's set in a Chinese Canadian family in Toronto. Anyway, you have to see it because it's really cool. Like there was nothing like that when I was growing up. So how do you see it changing the story, and sort of what are some of the different stories that you teach?
Yeah. That was a big piece of my own journey. I was told early on, pain ran in the family, painful menstruation ran in the family. I remember being like 12 years old and in so much pain, but not telling anyone about it, and just like staying in the car and like screaming in pain and totally suffering in silence, like too embarrassed to ask for pads when I needed more, too embarrassed to ask for ibuprofen, like all these different things. I was on birth control from the age of like 15 to 20 something. And so getting to know my cycle, that was definitely one thing that I did early on in my, now I look back, I'm like, oh, that was like part of my pelvic healing journey that just started like a few years ago. And that, it's something we address really early on, because in the work that I do, because it does hold so much. What we learn about it or we don't learn about our menstruation early on shapes what we feel about our pelvis, our uterus, how we feel about being woman. And it is inherently ancestral, because we tend to learn from the women in our family. And that is not to shame or blame our mothers and grandmothers, like looking at what they went through and what their relationship to their blood and their pelvis was like, is like, whoa, mind blowing. So I think that overall, we have such a beautiful opportunity to do this work now. The fact that this is even a conversation, the fact that there is, there are shifts and there are, social media, things like that, it is more open. And, there is, again, getting to know and listen to our body and understanding it at a deeper level is so important, because to really move through painful menstruation or to heal things like endometriosis or PCOS or infertility that we can be told is like, this is what you have and that's just it, that continues to shape. It's really hard to heal your body or believe that you think that your body can heal if you have this deep hatred of your body due to dis-ease that you and or maybe some of your family members have held. And that's just been conditioned from an early age that like, this is it. This is your curse. This is womanhood. It's painful. And doctors still will share that narrative of it's painful. This is normal. This is part of being a woman. Take some painkillers, like all these different layers that, there's just not research and understanding of the female body still.
And I think a lot of fear around changing that narrative, right? I mean, because a different narrative is much more empowering.
So much fear. And, I talked about that recently with the Supreme Court opinion coming out and how, just taking a step back and looking at how much energy and resources go into controlling the female body and like not allowing us to have this freedom and tapping into this power that we hold, like that is clearly there's something there. You know?
Yes. You could debate on how many thousands of years.
Yes, exactly. And with that fear too, you know, it is ancestral to fear our bodies, our power, our wisdom as women. There is like an ancient witch wound around that, right? That I have definitely recognized as I share more and more of this work. And it's something that I just kind of am willing to dance with. And it is, you know, we have been harmed in the past, and our cells remember that for things like pelvic steaming or herbal wisdom or body wisdom. So there are so many layers to this, you know, fear in our body.
Yeah, I feel like we could talk for another hour, but I'm going to be respectful of your time. I'm so curious about the Denver Dublin connection, and I have my, you know, a couple of generations back, Irish roots, and I don't know, it's like another thread in my life. So I was curious to ask you about that and how you see similarities and differences between the two cultures without going too deeply into it.
So I'm going to travel there to offer in-person sessions for the first time this year. I have been for personal reasons, and my ancestral roots are of Celtic ancestry. And I work with women all over the world in my online programs. So it's a beautiful place that I am comfortable with. That is an English-speaking country that I can travel to and offer a lot of convenience for women who are coming from Europe or Dubai or wherever that's closer to there than Colorado. Mm-hmm. And, you know, that is something that it's inspiring to work with women all over, because that goes back to feeling like we are not alone in this. You know, it's not just as messed up as it can be in the States for women's health. It's not just here. And there's so many, you know, so much opportunity to learn from other women. And I always learn so much from every single one that I work with. So I'm excited to go over there and return to the land of my ancestors to do some of this work.
Incredible. Well, I'm definitely going to keep my eye on your retreats, because I mean, I always enjoy opportunities to connect in person with other women. This work is so needed and so powerful. I'm in a online container right now, which is incredible. And they're all in Europe. I'm the only one that's not in Europe. And to your point, you know, like there's just so many of these themes that are universal, and it's, I don't know, sometimes overwhelming to realize just, you know, how massive the planet is and how many commonalities are in terms of us feeling small in areas of our lives that we don't need to be, and then just how deep this work goes. So tell us, what are you currently, this will probably be out in the next 8 weeks, if you want to tell us about what's on the menu.
Yeah, absolutely. You can find more about me at Integrative Pelvic Care on Instagram. That is my hub and community with online free resources. And
really cool account to follow.
Thank you. And it's me on the DMs if you do send me a message and have any questions. There's lots of Q&As, meditations, things like that, and anatomy. So I think that that's all really important, and want to validate that stepping into a container around this work with some lady from Instagram can be daunting. So I want people to be able to really feel me out. And that all being said, my introductory container called Foundation, which our pelvis is the foundation of our body. And this is the foundational, really nervous system oriented introduction to this work. I generally offer that as a hybrid of live and recorded content. Sometimes I will also do it live, so just keep an eye out for that. And that is where to begin this work with me. I also offer some private containers, but I really encourage the group aspect because of the sisterhood piece of it. And it really has changed how women are able to receive the in-person work, if we do work together in person, as well as the confidence and trust and security that they feel in their bodies to remember that they are the healer, that their hands are healing, that, being able to sit and feel the flutter, I would describe it, of healing and change occurring in your body. That's where it's at. I can talk all day long about, this can all happen, but for you to feel it after doing the work in your home is just life-changing. And when we know how to do this work in our body, it allows us to support the women in our lives and the other people in our lives that we may come into contact with, which I think is really, really important for us, is to remember and to hold this wisdom within ourselves and our communities.
Yes. Love it. All right. Well, one last thing to wrap up, because I know what you just touched on, can you give us some examples of women that have been through your programs and something like completely unrelated transpired that they had no idea that was at all, it wasn't their intention for signing up for this kind of work?
Yeah. Money is a big one. That, that comes through root and security and stability, as well as worthiness around receiving and support. It's all so connected. And I think as women, there is so much around money and money. I actually wrote the other day about money and body and sex shame that we hold. Things like digestive changes, which are often, sought after, but I think that there is a level of kind of disbelief that can actually change.
That's related. Yeah.
To
the degree to change.
Yeah, exactly. Birthing projects and businesses into the world and really having a shift in being comfortable to show up and speak your truth and the confidence to be seen. Because when we don't feel safe, there's something in us that doesn't want to show up, that doesn't want to be seen online, that doesn't want to speak up online for all these reasons. And it's not always, directly connected in the world of pelvic healing that this is going to help my business or my creation or my art or, whatever it is that we have desires around sharing and impacting the world. And so that's definitely a big one.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Mm-hmm. Amazing. Well, for me, it's really been, over the last year in particular that I've always had pelvic health, if you will. I mean, not always, since I had my own experience, which would have been a while ago now, 5 or 6 years ago. But I still had it in this health category. I really didn't think of it as overall wellness. I didn't think of it as being so tied to emotional, mental, and spiritual wellness. And I think that's everything you just touched on, all of the quote unquote unrelated things that are completely related and tied together. So yeah, well, we'll put your Instagram in the show notes and anything else you want to send me after, and we will be in touch. I know we will. Thank you so much for sharing your energy and time with us today.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me. Thanks for listening.
Thank you so much for listening to Energetically You. I hope that this episode has helped you to tune into your natural energy sources so that you feel more energized and focused throughout your day. If you enjoyed the episode, please take a second to rate and review. Each review helps us to help more ambitious women just like you accomplish their goals. See you soon.